Now to the conflict in Israel and Gaza. Amongst the reports of military raids, airstrikes and the desperate need for humanitarian aid are the stories of real families mourning the loss of loved ones.
Let's focus now on the family of 22-year-old Yosef Guedalia. He was serving in the Israeli army and was trying to rescue civilians from Hamas's brutal attack on the 7th of October when he was shot dead by the terrorist group. He leaves behind a heartbroken family, a young wife, Sinai, and 2 older brothers. Well, we can speak now to Yosef's father, David Guedalia. David, thank you so much for talking to us in the most difficult of circumstances. Tell us about Yosef and what happened to him.
Thank you. So Yosef was a wonderful boy. I mean, as a little boy, he just smiled a lot. He loved life. He was full of joy. His teachers would get angry at him because he just constantly smiled. They'd ask him a question, he would smile. I never saw him get angry once in his life. He was just a beautiful boy to have at home. And he was very diligent. He worked hard. He was active. He sport. On a typical Friday, he'd get up and play frisbee first thing in the morning, and then he'd go and play basketball, and then he'd go and work out, and then he did a lot of work constantly. But he also trained to be there first. On Saturday, the fateful day. So there were sirens. We were in Jerusalem as a family, and there were sirens indicating a rocket attack on Jerusalem. And Yosef checked his phone and saw that, in his words, there was a balagan, there was a mess happening in the south. And he got in a car at about 9:30, said goodbye to his wife. I'll see you soon, I love you, and off he went. Took him a couple hours to get into the fighting, and then he joined with a couple of friends from his unit. They went into Kfar Aza. One of his friends survived and described what they did as follows. They entered Kfar Aza, and behind every door was a terrorist. Behind every terrorist was a civilian. They didn't have time to think of some plan. It was very straightforward, save the civilians. And for 2 hours, he fought in Kfar Aza with his friends until his Jeep was hit by an RPG. They jumped out of the Jeep. They continued fighting. They had burns, and then a grenade was thrown. Then a second grenade was thrown. And that was the last his friend had heard from Yosef. It seemed Yosef continued to fight onward. The next piece of information we have is that there were 2 terrorists had attempting to take Yosef's body across the border to Gaza. I assumed to kidnap his body and cause us even more pain. But this was spotted by the IDF, and his body was retrieved.
And just in terms of his heroic sacrifice, he put other people before himself.
Yes, there's actually a video. You can see him actively with treating a civilian. They're extracting a civilian from within the fighting. They loaded him into the car. They extracted him out of the danger zone, and then he went right back in. He was in the first wave of fighters into Kfar Aza, and there was no time to try and be defensive. It was very much about every minute that you're not actively saving civilians, they're being murdered. The evil is beyond comprehension. You know, just murdering people in their beds, and Yosef just with his friends, you know, did the right thing. They jumped right into the fray and rescued as many people as they could.
David, you mentioned there the video, and I cannot even begin to comprehend what it must have been like for you to witness those last moments of Yosef's life. And to compound this, you have 2 other sons, both reservists. Are they both now fighting?
So one is actively fighting, and one has been relieved of reserve duty. So yeah, it's not a simple situation. We also have 2 son-in-laws that are reservists, and you know, it's not only a personal tragedy. The country's at war, and we feel it acutely. Yes.
Sorry, I understand you met the Archbishop of Canterbury. Is that right?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
His Grace was very generous, and yes. So His Grace found time to sit with us Um, I wanted to thank him as well again for taking the time and to share, I think to share in our pain. You know, he said he couldn't comfort us. He could just maybe provide some solace. I think there's that element too. You know, there was another element, which is, as Jews, we seem to take evil lightly. We whitewash it a lot. Like there's evil is okay, but really God has a plan, and there's some. And in this case, I think the Christian perspective I was, you know, hoping could provide better insight into the nature of evil. And one of the things, as Grace mentioned, was that he has seen evil up close before. He recognizes it when he sees it. Being able to identify it, not to whitewash it, is important. And hearing him say that, and also just his ability to be with my wife and with Sinai, the widow of my son, it was very, you know, it eases the pain. And so that was very significant. Thank you again.
And in terms of Yosef and indeed all the families that have been affected by, as you say, a country at war, what does Israel do from here? Netanyahu very clear that a ground incursion will come at Israel's bidding in Israel's own time. I imagine you still support that.
Right. So that's a complicated question, of course, as a father of someone whose son was killed in action. I think that there are two parts to my feelings there. One is, it's not about revenge. It's not about deterrence. It's about an evil that's next door to me. As long as there are these communities, not individuals, communities of evil people that want to murder, rape, I can't even say the things they did, the barbaric actions. As long as they're next door, that evil can't continue to exist. So I fully support eradicating evil. As an individual, I can say I don't really feel a need for revenge as an individual. I do feel that my own loss has made me acutely aware of the situation, and I think, you know, that the things I'm looking for are more to see Yosef's joy of life permeate, and to see his friends grow, and to see people influenced by the good that was Yosef. It's hard for me to see how you know, further battle will, you know, provide solace. But again, I think it's at the moment necessary.
When you look, David, at the images of Gaza now, and you hear the accounts of the aid agencies of thousands of children dying there, as well as the children that have died in this horrific attack in Israel, and children buried under the rubble, how do you feel about Israel's response? And we know the international community, Britain, the United States, have said they back Israel, and Israel has a right to defend itself. But those images of Gaza...
But again, I think...
Sorry, David.
Again, it's a complicated question with a complicated answer. So I think, again, Hamas has proven itself to be an evil organization. Anyone who supports Hamas is not my friend. And I know there are multiple narratives, and everyone can read the story. I'm not trying to convince anybody that my narrative is true and that I'm a good guy. And all I know is, at the moment, you have to choose sides. Either you're my friend or you're Hamas's friend. That said, I think Israel, as a rule, as an entity, has always strived to avoid civilian casualties. All in favor of minimizing civilian casualties. But again, if those civilians are supporting Hamas, then in my narrative, they're not civilians.
And can I just ask you, in terms of the international community, do you feel you have enough support from the international community? Also, I wonder what your response is to various countries calling for a humanitarian pause in what is going on, others calling for a ceasefire. You said you didn't want to see civilians harmed, more civilians harmed in this conflict. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think if the statement is the European Union, the international community recognizes the evil that is Hamas. Statement number one. We will eradicate, the entire cultural world, anyone who believes in good, we, the international community, will eradicate the evil that is Hamas. But it's going to take time. I understand that completely. If that includes a ceasefire, if that includes humanitarian corridors, wonderful. But it has to be absolutely clear that the international community cannot live with Hamas.
David Guedalia, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. I mean, devastating to hear.
It is.
David's account there, and those images of Yosef.
The whole thing
so
is,
young.
The whole thing is truly horrific, and I think it's very easy to talk in numbers, isn't it? To talk about the number of dead on both sides, but actually when you hear from a father about true grief, losing your son.
A young man just about to celebrate his first wedding anniversary and his whole life ahead of him.
And of course, I was thinking throughout that interview about the two brothers as well, who've been left, of course, both reservists as well.